Ryan sat in his sleek, modern apartment overlooking the glittering skyline of Seattle. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the city, but inside their home, there was a strange chill. He glanced at the clock. It was nearly 7 p.m. and Maya still hadn't come home from work. She was always late now, or at least that's what it felt like. 8 years. 8 years of marriage, and Ryan had always believed they had it all. A beautiful home, successful careers, and a relationship that was built on trust and companionship. But recently something had shifted. Maya had become distant, always too busy with work to spend time with him. He remembered a time not too long ago when their weekends were sacred. They would go hiking, watch movies, or simply relax together. But now Maya would spend most of her weekends at the office, often staying late into the night. Ryan tried to be understanding, but something inside him was beginning to question her excuses. His phone buzzed, pulling him out of his thoughts. A text from Maya. "Sorry, running late. Can you grab dinner without me? Love you." Ryan sighed, putting his phone down. This wasn't new. She had been sending similar messages more frequently. She was always running late, always too busy for him. And when he suggested picking her up from the office, she would always make up an excuse. He got up from the couch and walked over to the kitchen, starting to prepare dinner. As he chopped vegetables, his mind drifted back to the small things he had noticed over the past few months. Maya was different. She used to send him random texts during the day, little notes to let him know she was thinking about him. Now her messages were brief, almost robotic. Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He had always trusted Maya. She had always been the love of his life. But lately that trust was starting to slip through his fingers, like sand in the wind. Dinner was ready, but Maya still hadn't come home. He set the table for two as he always did, but the emptiness of the room felt overwhelming. He sat down and began eating alone, forcing each bite down as the gnawing feeling in his stomach grew. As the night stretched on, he tried to keep his mind occupied. He opened his laptop and started reviewing work emails. But every few minutes, his eyes would wander to the clock. 8:30, still no Maya. Ryan could feel the anxiety building inside him. He knew something was wrong, but he didn't know what. He had tried to ignore it, to brush it off as nothing. But deep down, a nagging voice told him that something was shifting in their marriage, something he couldn't ignore anymore. The phone buzzed again, interrupting his thoughts. "Home in 20 minutes, I promise. Sorry for the late night. Let's talk when I get back." Ryan read the message twice. "Let's talk when I get back." Her tone seemed so distant. He couldn't remember the last time they had a real conversation about anything. It was always just small talk, surface-level stuff. The connection that once seemed so strong between them now felt fragile, like it could break at any moment. Ryan pushed his chair back from the table, standing up and walking toward their bedroom. He sat down on the edge of the bed, running his hands through his hair. He didn't want to believe it, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. Maya was changing. And he wasn't sure if it was for the better. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a missed call from Maya. He stared at the screen, his heart pounding in his chest. Why hadn't she called him earlier? Why had it taken this long? Ryan picked up his phone and called her back. The phone rang several times before she answered, her voice sounding tired but strained. "Ryan, hey," Maya said softly. "I'm so sorry. It's been a crazy day. I'll be home soon." Ryan's heart skipped a beat. There was something about her voice that felt off. He wanted to ask her about everything, the late nights, the excuses, the distance. But he held back, not sure if he was ready to hear the answer. "Okay," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "I'll be waiting for you." Maya didn't say much more before hanging up, and Ryan was left alone again, his mind racing with doubts and questions. What was happening to their marriage? Had it really all been a lie? As he stared out of the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, he couldn't help but wonder how much longer he could pretend that everything was fine. His perfect life, his perfect marriage, was it really as perfect as he had believed? The sound of the front door opening snapped him back to reality. Maya was home. She walked into the living room looking exhausted. "Sorry I'm late," she said quickly, removing her jacket and tossing it over the back of the couch. Ryan stood up, his pulse quickening. He wanted to ask her everything, to confront her about what he had been feeling. But he held back, unsure of where it would lead. Maya smiled faintly and sat down next to him, but Ryan could feel the distance between them. He glanced at her, trying to read her face, but she was too good at hiding her emotions. "Ryan," she began, hesitating for a moment. "Can we talk later? I'm just so tired." Ryan nodded, though his heart was heavy. He wanted to believe her, but the weight of doubt hung over him like a dark cloud. As the night dragged on, the silence between them felt more pronounced than ever. Ryan lay in bed next to Maya, but sleep wouldn't come. The questions and suspicions continued to churn in his mind, and he couldn't escape the nagging feeling that things were falling apart, slowly but surely. He just didn't know how much longer he could ignore it. The next few days passed in a blur for Ryan. Maya's behavior continued to shift. She came home late every night, her excuses growing more elaborate and harder to believe. She started working even on weekends, leaving Ryan to fill the void with distractions. Long hours at the office or solitary weekends spent working on personal projects. They barely spent time together, and when they did, it felt like they were strangers. Ryan tried to push his suspicions aside, but they gnawed at him, growing stronger with each passing day. It wasn't just the late nights. It was the little things, how Maya would always seem to be looking at her phone, how she would quickly close windows or delete messages whenever he got too close. Ryan's curiosity began to turn into something darker: distrust, doubt, and an insatiable desire for answers. It was a Wednesday evening when Ryan's suspicions finally reached a boiling point. Maya had once again stayed late at work, and when she came home she was distant, her eyes glued to her phone as she murmured a quick hi before retreating to their bedroom. Ryan sat at the kitchen table, his mind racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. His gaze shifted to the living room, where Maya's phone sat on the coffee table. His heart pounded as the urge to check it overwhelmed him. He hesitated for a moment, guilt flooding him, but then the need for answers outweighed everything else. He picked up her phone cautiously, glancing at the screen. There was a message from a contact labeled Ethan. Ryan's stomach twisted. Maya had never mentioned an Ethan before. He opened the message and his eyes scanned the text. "I can't wait to see you again tonight. I've been thinking about you all day." Ryan felt his blood run cold. The words burned into his mind. His fingers trembled as he read it again. There was no denying it now. Maya was having an affair. His heart shattered in an instant. How had he missed the signs? How had he been so blind? He put the phone back down on the table, his mind reeling. The betrayal stung, but at the same time, he couldn't shake the overwhelming need to confront her. He had to know the truth. But how? How could he face her after discovering this? Ryan walked slowly into the bedroom, his footsteps heavy. Maya was lying on the bed, scrolling through her phone. Her face lit up by the soft glow of the screen. She didn't even notice him standing in the doorway. "Maya," Ryan said, his voice shaky, "we need to talk." Maya looked up, her expression shifting slightly, but she didn't seem surprised. She had probably known this moment was coming, but it still hit her like a blow to the chest. She set the phone down and sat up, her eyes darting nervously. "What's going on, Ryan?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan's heart was pounding in his chest as he tried to keep his composure. "Who's Ethan?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Maya froze, her breath catching in her throat. The color drained from her face and she looked at him like a deer caught in headlights. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was deafening. Ryan's fists clenched at his sides, his mind racing. He had to know. He couldn't just stand here waiting for her to lie. "Maya, don't do this. Just tell me the truth. I know about Ethan." Maya's gaze dropped to the floor and she exhaled sharply. I never meant for it to happen, Ryan. I never planned it. It just did." Ryan felt a cold, hollow emptiness settle inside him. Her words sounded like a faint echo in his ears, as if he were hearing them through a thick fog. "You've been seeing him behind my back?" he asked, his voice trembling with anger and disbelief. Maya nodded slowly, unable to meet his eyes. "Yes. I'm sorry, Ryan. I never wanted to hurt you." Ryan stood there, motionless, his mind spinning. He had never imagined something like this could happen. He had trusted her with everything. He had given her his heart, his time, his life. And now, it felt like all of it had been ripped away from him, piece by piece. "You're sorry?" he asked bitterly. "Is that supposed to make this all okay? You've been lying to me, Maya. For months. And you think a simple sorry is enough?" Maya stood up, taking a hesitant step toward him. "Ryan, please just hear me out. It wasn't like that. I don't know how to explain it, but it's not about you. It's me. A bit. I've been lost for a long time." Ryan shook his head, his voice rising with frustration. "Lost? You don't just cheat because you're lost, Maya. You don't just throw everything away because you're confused." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing back and forth. "I thought we were happy. I thought we had a good life together. What the hell happened?" Maya was silent, her eyes welling up with tears. "I don't know. I thought I could handle everything, but I couldn't. I didn't mean for things to get so out of control. Ryan stopped in his tracks and turned to face her. So, this is it then? This is where we are? You've been seeing someone else behind my back, and now you're trying to tell me that you were lost? I don't even know who you are anymore, Maya. Maya's face crumpled as she took a step toward him. Ryan, please. I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make it right, but I never wanted to hurt you. Ryan stared at her for a long moment, his chest tight with a mixture of anger and devastation. He wanted to yell, to scream, to do anything to make the pain go away. But he couldn't. All he could do was stand there, feeling like everything he had worked for was slipping through his fingers. He couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe Maya, the woman he loved, the woman he thought he knew, had betrayed him in this way. I can't do this, Maya, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I can't look at you and pretend that everything is okay. I can't be with someone who doesn't respect me. Maya reached out to him, her eyes filled with regret. But Ryan stepped back, putting space between them. He had already made up his mind. He couldn't stay in a relationship built on lies. Without another word, Ryan turned and walked out of the room, leaving Maya standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. The days that followed were a blur for Ryan. The apartment felt colder, emptier than ever before. The silence between him and Maya was unbearable, but neither of them seemed willing to break it. Maya had tried to talk to him several times, but every time she approached him, Ryan pulled away, unable to face the reality of what she had done. He couldn't shake the images of the text messages. The thought of Maya with Ethan haunted him constantly. He had never felt so betrayed, so small. What was worse, he realized, was that he had spent months, perhaps even years, turning a blind eye to the signs, convinced that everything was fine. Now everything felt like a lie. Ryan threw himself into work, burying himself in the long hours he once shared with Maya. At least there he could distract himself from the pain. But no matter how hard he worked, no matter how much he tried to forget, the betrayal lingered. He couldn't get the image of Maya's face, the way she had looked when she confessed, out of his mind. He tried to avoid coming home as much as possible. He stayed late at the office, spent hours at the gym, anything to keep from facing her. But it didn't change the fact that when he finally did come home, the same heavy, suffocating silence awaited him. Maya had started sleeping in the guest bedroom, but even from across the hall, he could feel the tension in the air. One afternoon, nearly a week after their confrontation, Ryan returned home to an unexpected sight. Maya was sitting on the couch, her hands folded in her lap, staring at the floor. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed as if she had been crying for hours. She hadn't made any attempt to reach out to him in the days since their fight, but now she seemed different, vulnerable. Ryan's stomach twisted at the sight of her. He didn't want to feel sorry for her. He didn't want to care. She had destroyed everything, and yet, here she was, looking as if she needed his forgiveness. Maya, Ryan said, his voice cold. What do you want? Maya looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and desperation. I want to talk. I don't know how to fix this, Ryan, but I need to explain. Please, just let me explain. Ryan stood there for a moment, his arms crossed over his chest, before he walked past her and sat down at the kitchen table. He was done with the lies. He didn't know if he was ready to hear what she had to say, but part of him wanted to understand, needed to understand, why this had happened. Maya took a deep breath and began, her voice trembling. It wasn't about you, Ryan. I wasn't looking for something else, not at first. I don't know how it happened, but I felt like I was losing myself. I've been so caught up in my work and everything else, and then he was just there. He listened to me. He made me feel seen. Her voice cracked and she paused to wipe away a tear. But it was wrong. I know it was wrong. I never should have done it. I never should have let it go this far. Ryan stared at her, his jaw clenched. The words stung, but there was a part of him that couldn't ignore the pain in her voice. He knew she was sorry. He could see it in her eyes. But sorry wasn't enough. Sorry didn't erase the betrayal. Sorry didn't fix the damage that had been done. You're telling me this now? Ryan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. After everything? After months of hiding it, you think you can just explain it away? Do you think I'm supposed to forget what you've done? Maya's face twisted in anguish. I don't expect you to forgive me, Ryan. I don't. But I'm begging you to understand that I never wanted to hurt you. I've been lost. I've been miserable and I didn't know how to fix it. I thought this, she gestured helplessly toward the empty space between them, was the only way. Ryan stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He couldn't listen to this anymore. He couldn't let her words drown him in guilt and confusion. She had betrayed him, and no amount of explaining was going to change that. Enough, Ryan said firmly, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. I don't need your excuses. I don't need your explanations. You've already made your choice. And I need to make mine. Maya's eyes widened in shock and she stood up as well, stepping closer to him. What do you mean? Ryan, please don't do this. We can fix this. We can go to therapy, we can… No, Maya, Ryan interrupted, his voice breaking. I can't fix this. I don't even know who you are anymore. I don't know who I am with you. He turned away from her, unable to look her in the eye. I thought I knew everything about you. I thought we had something real. But this has shattered everything. Maya reached out to him, but he took a step back, putting more distance between them. I can't live like this. I can't keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not. I can't keep pretending that I'm okay with what you've done. Maya's eyes filled with tears again, but Ryan couldn't allow himself to feel sorry for her. He had to be strong for his own sake. I'm leaving, Ryan said, his voice steady now. I need space. I need to figure out who I am without you. With that, he walked toward the door, grabbing his coat and keys. He didn't look back as he left the apartment, leaving behind the woman who had once been his everything. Outside, the cold Seattle air hit him like a slap in the face. But he didn't feel the sting of the wind. All he could feel was the weight of the decision he had just made. Ryan had walked away. And for the first time in days he felt a glimmer of clarity. The days that followed were suffocating. Ryan moved into a small, temporary apartment downtown, a place that felt unfamiliar and cold. He had never imagined it would come to this. He had thought that his life with Maya would be the one constant he could rely on. But now he was living alone, navigating through the pain of betrayal and the uncertainty of the future. The silence in the apartment was overwhelming. The hum of city traffic outside, the occasional footsteps in the hallway, everything seemed so distant compared to the life he had once known. Every morning Ryan would wake up, feel the weight of the emptiness and force himself to go through the motions. Work helped, but it wasn't enough to fill the void Maya had left behind. Every night he would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the things he had lost. His mind replayed the confrontation over and over again. The look in Maya's eyes when she confessed, the way her voice had trembled with guilt. The words she said echoed in his mind, and every time, they made him question whether he had made the right decision. But he couldn't go back. He couldn't unhear what she had said, couldn't unsee the way she had acted. It was impossible to ignore the fact that she had chosen someone else. Ryan had to let go. He knew that even if it hurt more than anything he had ever felt. But despite knowing this, the loneliness gnawed at him. In the quiet of his new apartment, he realized just how much of his life had been built around Maya. They had shared so much, dreams, plans, the little things that made a life together. Now everything felt like it was in pieces. He missed the sound of her laughter, the way she would make him coffee in the mornings, the way they would talk about everything and nothing all at once. One evening, just as he was getting ready to leave for a work dinner, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from Maya. I miss you. Can we talk? Ryan stared at the screen, the words pulling him back in. He hadn't heard from her in days. It had been a week since he left, and Maya had respected his space at least on the surface. But now she was reaching out, desperate for something. Maybe for forgiveness or maybe for closure. Ryan's heart wavered for a moment. He wanted to believe that things could be fixed. He wanted to believe that somehow, they could go back to the way they were before everything fell apart. But he knew better now. Maya's betrayal had left a scar that couldn't be erased with a simple conversation. He took a deep breath, his fingers hovering over the screen. He knew what he needed to do, but the decision was hard. Every part of him wanted to let her back in, wanted to believe that the woman he had loved was still there beneath the mistakes. But the rational part of him knew he couldn't go back. I don't think I'm ready for that, he typed slowly, his fingers trembling. Maybe someday, but not now. He stared at the message for a long time before hitting send. It felt final. And yet, a part of him wanted to reach out to her, to soften the blow, to give her the answer she was searching for. But he had already given her everything: trust, love, and loyalty. Now all he had left was his dignity. His phone buzzed again almost immediately, and he opened Maya's response. I understand. I don't know how to live with myself right now. I'm sorry, Ryan. I'm so sorry for everything. Ryan read the message twice and his chest tightened. She was sorry. But sorry couldn't change what had happened. Sorry couldn't undo the lies, the betrayal, the months of deception. He had given her a chance to come clean, to be honest with him, but instead she chose to hide behind her secrets. For a long time he sat there, staring at the screen, feeling the weight of everything he had lost. There was a time when Maya's apology would have been enough. A time when they could have worked through their problems together. But that time had passed. He had made his choice, and as painful as it was, he knew he couldn't go back to the person who had hurt him. Ryan put his phone down and stood up, walking toward the window. The Seattle skyline stretched out before him, lights twinkling in the distance. It was beautiful in a way but also lonely. Just like him. He was alone now, but for the first time since everything fell apart, he didn't feel entirely broken. The silence in his apartment was still unbearable, but it was his silence. His space. His chance to heal. Ryan knew it would take time. Time to rebuild. Time to forgive himself for the years he had spent living a lie. Time to learn who he was without Maya by his side. But as he stood there, looking out at the city, a faint glimmer of hope stirred within him. It wasn't the same as before, but it was something. It was a start. And for the first time in a long time, Ryan believed that someday he would be okay again. Ryan spent the next few weeks slowly rebuilding his life. The process wasn't easy, and there were moments when he felt like he was treading water, struggling to stay afloat. The apartment still felt too empty, and sometimes the silence was deafening. He couldn't help but miss the life he had once shared with Maya. But he also knew that life had changed, and that change was irreversible. He could no longer pretend that things would go back to the way they were. He had stopped checking his phone for messages from her. He had told himself that he needed to focus on himself, to heal. Still, every time his phone buzzed, his heart would race, and a flicker of hope would spark inside him. But each time it wasn't Maya, each time it was just work or something trivial, the hope would fizzle out, leaving him with an ache in his chest. Work became his sanctuary. It wasn't just a distraction, it was a way for him to regain control of his life. His colleagues noticed the change in him. He was more focused, more determined. He threw himself into new projects, taking on responsibilities that pushed him to think differently, to see the world with fresh eyes. But even as his career flourished, there was still a lingering emptiness, a nagging question he couldn't shake. Could he ever trust again? One day, as Ryan walked through the bustling streets of Seattle after a long day at the office, he found himself walking past the coffee shop he used to visit with Maya. The memories hit him like a wave, sipping coffee together, laughing about the little things, planning their future. He stopped for a moment, staring through the window, and saw couples sitting at tables, chatting, smiling. He felt a pang of loss, but he didn't let it stop him. He kept walking, letting the city's noise wash over him. It was his escape, his way of moving forward. As the weeks turned into months, Ryan began to take small steps toward a new life. He joined a local gym, something he had always wanted to do but had never made time for. He started going out with friends more, reconnecting with people he hadn't seen in ages. He even picked up a few hobbies, painting, something he had always been passionate about but had neglected during the whirlwind of his relationship with Maya. But the real change came when Ryan decided to take a trip. It was impulsive. He had always wanted to visit the coast of Oregon, but had never made the time. So one weekend he packed a bag, rented a car, and drove down the scenic highway. It was the first time in a long while that he felt free, truly free. The ocean stretched out before him, endless and beautiful, a reminder of how vast the world was beyond the confines of his broken relationship. Standing on the edge of the cliffs, watching the waves crash below, Ryan felt something shift inside him. The pain, the heartbreak, all of it, it was still there, but it wasn't consuming him anymore. The ocean, with its unrelenting power and beauty, reminded him that life was constantly changing. The tides would always rise and fall, and so would the emotions that had once held him captive. It was in that moment that Ryan realized something profound. He had to stop defining himself by his past. Maya had been a part of his story, but she was no longer the author of it. He could still write his own chapters. He could still create the life he wanted. When Ryan returned to Seattle, he felt lighter. The pain hadn't disappeared, but he had learned to live with it. He wasn't in a rush to move on, but he also wasn't going to let the past control him any longer. A few weeks later, Ryan ran into an old friend from college, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. They grabbed coffee and caught up on life. It was easy, comfortable, and for the first time in a long time, Ryan felt like he was starting to reconnect with the world around him. He wasn't looking for anything serious, but there was a part of him that felt ready to open up again, slowly, cautiously, but with hope. And then, one day out of nowhere, he received a message from Maya. His heart skipped a beat. He had thought about her less and less over the past few months, but now, here she was, reaching out once more. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I miss you, Ryan. Can we talk?" Ryan stared at the message, his mind flooded with conflicting emotions. He had moved on. He had begun to heal, to see the world beyond her betrayal. But there was still a part of him that wondered, what if? He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a deep breath, set his phone down, and let the silence fill the room. He had come so far, and the last thing he wanted was to fall back into the same patterns that had hurt him before. After a few hours, he picked up his phone and typed a response. I've moved on, Maya. I think it's time for both of us to keep going in different directions. I hope you find peace. Ryan paused for a moment, looking at the words he had just typed. There was no anger, no bitterness, just clarity. He didn't need closure from her anymore. He had found it within himself. He pressed send. As he set the phone down and looked out the window, Ryan smiled. He was free. The past was behind him and the future was waiting. For the first time in months, he felt truly at peace.